I love racing. I was that competitive little girl. I loved the speed, I loved the adrenaline, and I loved the sport. But it wasn't an environment where I felt I could show any form of weakness. I remember a World Series, I could barely hang on out on track, but I came into the pits and said, yeah, everything's fine to the team, and went to the toilets and cried my eyes out. Meeting Toto and getting married, it was the first time I didn't feel like I was on my own. He never wrapped me in cotton wool, but he got it, not shying me away from the challenges.
Never fear a storm.
Be ready to adapt.
The skill is staying true to ourselves.
Susie, welcome to High Performance.
Thank you for having me.
In recent years, how much has the drive for equality, pushing women in motorsport, how much of a toll has it taken on you personally at times?
That's a tough question. I feel like when I hung up my helmet, I started Dare to Be Different. It obviously became Girls on Track, and I felt like I'd done all the panel discussions. I'd done what I could to give back to the sport, because I do believe in energy. If you take, you've got to give back. And I kind of felt, okay, I've done my part, and I was off looking at the space industry to think I need to get out of my comfort zone and try something completely different. But when Stefano called with the idea of F1 Academy, I suddenly started thinking, well, that's something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. That the pinnacle of the sport was willing to not just invest, but really get behind something which would create opportunity long term. And after discussing it with Toto and him saying, listen, if you don't do it, who will? And you'll always have to know that that chance was there and you didn't take it. So I took the chance, and it was tough at the beginning because what F1 Academy had been set up for. And I'll never forget the first time I went to the first race. I'd been in Bahrain, met all the team principals, been announced. And then I arrived at Paul Ricard, and there was nobody there. And I mean nobody. And I'd never been to a racetrack that was so deserted. It was just the F1 Academy teams and drivers and 4 or 5 personnel. And I remember thinking, this is not going to work. There's nobody here. And then I just literally got out of my car, and the teams came to see me and said, well, listen, we're not finding any sponsorship. So it's great that you're here now because we're not going to continue. And then the drivers came to me and said, well, we can't even find the budget to travel to the races, never mind contribute to our racing budget. And I suddenly thought, okay, this needs a lot of work. This is not sustainable as it is. And I immediately called Stefano and said, okay, I need 6 weeks to deep dive in how this is even going to function, because I don't think this model that you've built will be something which is medium to long term successful. And that then started the process of, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to build up to actually get more women into the sport off track as well as on track? And what are the building blocks we need in place for long term success? So I completely changed the business model. Now the teams are on board. We race with F1. We took in all the assets. We centralised them and stopped the teams and drivers having to go out and search individually for sponsorships. And in a short space of time, I sometimes have to pinch myself just how far we've come and how much momentum we have.
A recent survey said that F1 Academy is the second most watched motorsport by F1 fans, which is an incredible achievement in such a short space of time. And we will talk about how you've done this, because I think that, so much of the accolades for building it and growing it and getting it to where it is belong to you. But I remember the news breaking in late 2023 when the FIA accused you of, and the exact phrase was, a conflict of interest because of your marriage to Toto. For you to be on such a high, creating something so great, and then for that to happen, would you tell us how you felt when you first saw or heard the rumour that this was something that the FIA were pursuing?
Well, I think it's important to mention that Formula One Academy is not an FIA-governed championship. So I actually have no interactions with the FIA at all. We write our own sporting regs, and we registered the championship through an ASN. So there's no relationship with the FIA. And I've been in this sport long enough to know that there's punches thrown every now and then. But when it came out, my initial reaction was, well, that's just ludicrous, because I had nothing to do with the F1 business. Running F1 Academy or trying to build it up was taking all of my capacity and energy. So initially there was a kind of disbelief, but then when it all started unfolding that it was serious and there was going to be an investigation, that's when I really got angry. Because the fact that such a thing could happen with no grounds, with no evidence, but just an idea, and then for it to be suddenly dropped, was for me a moment where I just wasn't willing to accept being treated like that. That my name would be thrown out into an investigation that obviously became very public very quickly, with zero grounds, and then suddenly have it dropped kind of 24 hours later.
And how did you process that anger to use it as a fuel rather than let it to consume you?
Well, I've got pretty good over the years of turning failure and doors being slammed in my face into, let's say, more energy to try and succeed and to break down the barriers in front of me. But I'm quite pragmatic in those situations. It was not an emotional reaction to say, this is so not fair, what will I do? It was like, okay, well, I want there to be a process now. I want to understand who took that decision. I want there to be transparency in how such a decision was taken. And I want there to be accountability, because I can't stand up and preach about how I'm trying to make the sport better for women and about how I feel the sport is becoming a better sport for women to be in if I'm not willing to stand up and take action in situations where I feel something wrong has happened. So it was quite an easy decision to say, okay, well, I'm going to launch a defamation case in the French criminal courts.
When you saw this thing gathering momentum, and we know that the internet never forgets, right? Once something's out there, it's out there. It can't just be forgotten 24 hours later. When you saw the retweets and the social media posts and the news articles, hundreds of news articles within hours of this, what was your emotion at that point? Because I think we so often don't talk about the personal toll on the human being in the middle of a story like that.
It wasn't easy at the time, and it was on my birthday of all days. But I think in that situation, it was just this recurring emotion of thinking, well, I'm just not going to accept that.
I thought your reaction actually on Instagram was powerful. And for people that didn't see it, you said, deeply insulted but sadly unsurprised, rooted in intimidatory and misogynistic behaviour and focused on my marital status rather than my abilities. Did it remind you that despite so much work having been done by you and many other people over so many years, there's still so much further that we still need to go?
You know how much I love Formula One, and we know that you love the Formula One conversations here on High Performance. But the truth is that high performance in F1 isn't just what happens on the track. It's also about consistency. It's about identity. And you know what? Style works the same way, because the clothes that you wear, they become part of your story. They're the reason that you stand out. And that is why we're so excited to partner with Vestiaire Collective for the launch of their first ever menswear experience. You can now find a curated selection of standout menswear. That's Cartier watches, Louis Vuitton bags, Gucci sneakers, Burberry jackets, all available at up to 80% off retail. And it also goes the other way. If you think it's time to change up your wardrobe, you can sell your own pre-loved treasures with low fees while giving them a new lease of life. And with more than 15 years of authentication expertise, Vestiaire Collective makes buying and selling simple, stylish, and secure. Honestly, I think it's fantastic. Vestiaire Collective, the go-to destination for pre-loved premium menswear styles. To get involved, just click the link in the description to buy or sell men's pre-loved fashion. On High Performance, we talk a lot about ownership, about taking charge of the areas of your life that others leave to chance. Because when you step up and lead, you create the outcomes you want. And that's what Hive is here for, to put you in control of your energy. With solar, you can get the sun to work for you by turning sunlight from your roof into greener energy. And the control doesn't stop there. With the Hive app, you can track, manage, and optimize your energy all in one place. Clear, simple, built around you. And this, I think, is the real game changer. When you produce more energy than you need, you can sell it back to the grid, meaning the energy companies are paying you. At High Performance, look, we believe the future belongs to those who take action, and Hive puts that power directly in your hands, in your home. It's your energy, your rules. Hive, know your power. Visit hivehome.com to find out more. Output and savings varies by season, electricity usage and system size. Paid for surplus requires an eligible SEG tariff.
Yes, absolutely. But the amount of support I also got around that time, I mean, Stefano was one of the first to pick up the phone and say, well, we know there's no conflict of interest because we know you're not involved in the F1 side of the business. So we are going to stand by you 100%. And then in hearing that all 9 teams, I mean, obviously Mercedes couldn't lodge the same statement because they were involved in it, but all 9 teams stood up to unanimously say, we didn't file any complaint. Now, it's not often that all teams unite together, and they chose to unite behind me and behind F1 Academy. So that really meant something. So as much as I was very frustrated at what had happened, it was also a reminder that it's not all bad. We are making progress, and there are people that are willing to stand up and support what they believe is right. And I do get a lot of support from within the sport. And a lot of people praise me for how far F1 Academy has come, but it really is a credit to the sport because the F1 teams got behind it. I have the full support of F1, all the investment needed to build it up. There's a real authenticity to people in Formula One wanting to see F1 Academy be a success because they know that it can have a positive impact on the sport.
One of the most powerful voices of support came from Lewis Hamilton, who said that there's no transparency and no accountability. What did his support mean to you?
Well, I think Lewis is always someone that has been willing to use his voice for good and has always been someone that's seen a wider picture of how his influence can have or can have a positive impact. And, you know, sometimes it's easy to take the trodden path that everyone else does, but he's absolutely forged his own path and he's had such a big impact in the sport. It was no surprise for me that he was one to stand up and speak, because he is always the one that stands up to speak when there's something to be said or when something hasn't been said but needs to be said. And I don't think he sometimes gets enough credit for that. You know, he's turned that walk into the paddock into a catwalk. He's played a part in making Formula One culturally relevant outside of just, you know, motorsport and sport. And I do think he's someone that has a very powerful voice and uses it for good, and others should take some inspiration from that.
And have you spoken to him away from the sort of glare of global media about fight and about the power of having a purpose? Because I think sometimes when you really feel a strong sense of purpose, it does make the decision clearer for you, doesn't it?
It makes it clear, but I think it's also that we have been shaped by our experiences.
Yeah.
I know what it's to be the only one in the room. So does he. In a sport where we were more often than not either the only one or one of a handful. And it's very easy for people to think they know what that's like, but they don't. And I very often found myself in meeting rooms where, yes, I've been the only woman, but I have men telling me, well, this is what it should be, or when we talk about F1 Academy. And it's sometimes I have to turn around and say, well, are any of you a woman? Clearly you're not. I am. Have any of you driven a racing car? Or you haven't? And have any of you driven a Formula One car? Or you haven't? Well, don't tell me what it's like. Because I am a woman in this quite male-dominated environment. I have driven racing cars. I've come through the whole pathway. And I speak from first-hand experience, because sometimes people mean well, but they simply don't know what it's like to be the only one in the room. And I think his personal experience of having to face his own challenges along the way, break down his own barriers to get to where he is and become one of the greatest of all time, it gives him an empathy to others that also are facing challenges of being the only one, or let's say not, or following a path which isn't always easy.
And was it a hard decision to take the FIA to court to launch an action against them, knowing that, you know, your husband works in Formula One, you've got a long history in Formula One, it's a sport that you're really closely connected to, and you can't do these things without kind of implications, right?
I think you've seen that I've tried not to actually speak too much about the case.
Yeah.
I am someone that I take a decision and the decision's taken, and I take the steps on the decision. It's not about a vendetta. It's not about an emotionally driven revenge. It's simply what I feel is the right thing to do. There has to be accountability. There has to be transparency. And it's a very separate situation from Toto. This is my case. And in that this was my role at F1 Academy, I know what the boundaries are of having a husband that works in the same sport. I'm not out for success at all costs. There's an integrity that we both believe in. There's boundaries that we both have. But never once did we feel there was even close to those boundaries being passed. I mean, there's nothing I would know in my role at F1 Academy that would anyway have any influence on a team in Formula One. So the decision didn't involve Toto, but it was something I just simply felt I had to do, and I would regret if I didn't do.
We've both read your new book, Driven, and it is brilliant.
But you were going to say that. No, you can't tell me it's not good.
It's pretty good.
No, look, I texted you and I said it was excellent. Honestly, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And you say in the book that you've often felt like a token gesture to diversity. Do you ever feel like that today?
It was interesting writing the book because there was a lot of memories, a lot of reflection, and I have to give a lot of credit to my brother who stepped in to help me write it. I couldn't have done it without him. And he forced me to go to the tough places because I think I'm very good at compartmentalizing. And I was at times writing and he said, that's, you got to go deeper. I remember how tough those moments were for you. And I remember the battles that were going on in your head in certain situations. So he really forced me to go to those difficult moments throughout my career. And yes, of course, when I look back, it's more obvious looking back now that there were the moments where I was there because I was a woman. But on the other hand, I was there. I'd been given the chance. So there's two ways to look back that, yes, there was token gesture, female on the grid, but I was on the grid. And you don't make it onto the grid if you're not good enough. And I had been given chances in my career that I'm grateful for to this day because they changed not the trajectory of my career, but of my life. And those chances were only small chances, but I grabbed them with both hands and they were really pivotal moments in my career and my life. So I don't look back with any bitterness or with any regret. And I feel in a way now in my position with F1 Academy, it's great that things have moved on and that there are less, let's say, symbols of token gestures in the sport and on the grid. But I think at the time, it was part and parcel.
What struck me reading the book, Susie, was the moments of loneliness that often accompanied your journey. What was the moment that you felt most alone and how did you get through that?
Most alone was when I lost my F3 drive. I'd broken my ankle, I lost my sponsor, I lost the seat. And at that point, there were moments where I thought, I'm not sure I can get this back on track because I'd really lost all the momentum. And my parents were up in Scotland and I was quite isolated, having to still work to make a living. But I think sport can be very lonely because if you're not in a team sport, there's a lot of pressure to perform and it can be a lonely place because you're so consumed by the sport and by trying to be successful in the sport that it's difficult to build up a life outside of the sport because you make sacrifices. You don't go to the family gatherings. You don't go to your friends' invitations because you're busy doing your sport. And then suddenly when your sport's not there, well, what else is there? And your whole identity gets very hung up on who you are as a sports person as opposed to who you are as an individual.
So what did you learn about uncoupling your identity from who you are from what you did?
That only came much later in my life, and meeting Toto and getting married was definitely a huge help in that moment. It was the first time I didn't feel like I was on my own, that I could share my insecurities, that I could share my real thoughts with him because he understood it. He never wrapped me in cotton wool, but he got it, and he was always very good at giving me inputs, but not shying me away from the challenges, because he knew that it was a tough sport, and if I was going to succeed, I was going to have to be tough. But it really was the first moment with him where I felt, okay, I'm part of a team now. I'm not on my own. But even before meeting Toto, it was difficult to deal with the loneliness and the sense that I was only as good as my last race result. And it's something I quite often say to the young drivers I see now in F1 Academy. You are not judged by how good your last race was. You as an individual, you've done incredibly well to get this far, but don't allow your whole sense of self-worth to be wrapped up in how good your last race result was, because there's more. But it's quite difficult to see at that young age.
Sure.
And that's where I feel in a position where I can at least hand over that advice to the next generation now.
And do you feel it would have made a difference if anyone would have had that conversation with you in terms of your performance?
100%. And if there'd just been a woman that I could have spoken to and said, listen, this is tough. How did you deal with it? Or what did you do to cope with it? But there wasn't. But I did have allies around me who weren't women, but who were supportive, the number one being my family. So I always had them as that strong backbone that I always knew was there for me. And they definitely played a huge part throughout my journey, especially through the tough moments.
Can we talk then about some of those tough moments? I'm interested in your brother playing a really pivotal role in this book. Would you take us to one of the moments where you weren't very comfortable writing about it until he said, come on, I think we need the truth about this moment?
There was lots of moments of those. I remember when I first joined Mercedes-Benz and DTM, and I was struggling with, okay, what should I wear to an event? Because if I wear a dress, am I trying too hard? If I wear a suit, do I look too masculine? And it was a huge fight in my head before every event, thinking, okay, well, how am I turning up? And I was, that wasn't even going to make it into the book. But he said, I remember those struggles you had of trying to find your place, of you calling from the fitness week and saying, well, they didn't have a program for me. And I ended up doing the program that the boys did because I felt, well, I'm racing the same car. I have to do the same program. So he forced me to go there and to relive those experiences. And then obviously when I broke my ankle, it reminded me just how low that point was in my life and how difficult it was to keep going, because that would have been the moment where I could easily have said, well, the journey's come to an end. What else am I going to do? But it's sometimes just picking yourself up that one last time and giving it a try. That can sometimes just be the difference between success and failure. And I think because I had become so used to be having to pick myself up, so used to having to find that resilience and tenacity, that I was used to it. It wasn't something that threw me into a real unknown situation. I know what it's like to have to pick yourself back up, because in sport there's only ever one winner, and you get more used to failure than success unless you're Lewis or Max. So I knew what it was to pick myself back up and to come back stronger and to have that tenacity. And that ultimately was the turning point when I chose to keep going and got my big break with Mercedes.
Would you take us then to that tough period when you've broken your ankle? Because you write very movingly in the book that you've got a diary and you just write in it, please help me, Grandpa, right?
Yeah, my grandfather had passed away. And I was very close to him, and I had his cravat that he always used to wear. And I guess at that age, it's so easy looking back now because everything obviously did work out, but I was just so unsure of how I was going to get myself back out in a racing car. And
what had actually happened?
I'd had a great season for Formula Renault, finished 4th in the championship, and been nominated for Young Driver of the Year. That whole momentum, I was doing Formula 3 the following season. And just after New Year, I was out running I actually wasn't out running. I was out buying milk for my grandmother up in Scotland, and I slipped. There was ice on the pavement, and I broke my ankle in 4 places. I had a plate and 10 pins put, holding it back together, and lost my seat in the F3 team. That then meant I lost the sponsorship to do that season. And I really lost all the momentum. I wasn't racing anymore. And I went back down to Silverstone, where I was renting a room in a house full of racing drivers, because I still had to make a living and my parents still had to go back to work up in Scotland. But those were the difficult days. I was on crutches, in a lot of pain. I'd lost my race license. I'd lost my race seat. I'd lost the sponsorship, and I didn't really know how I was going to get everything back on track. So it was one of the most difficult periods.
And why your grandpa?
He's always someone that had believed in me, and not just him, but my whole family. But because he was the first member of our family to pass away, and he's someone I was very close with. And I think at that moment where you've run out of hope, you clutch at anything that you think could give you guidance or help you. And I am a great believer in trusting your gut instinct. And I remember a couple of times thinking, I'm just not sure I can keep going. I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel, but something inside of me said, you can't let it end like this. All of this can't just be gone because of one fall in icy pavement. And I got myself back out in a World Series by Renault car, and by the February of the following year, I'd had the call from Mercedes, and that really was the moment that changed everything.
And you would imagine that once you're racing in DTM and you're a Mercedes driver, that you would be getting more respect as a woman, but also that you would think, right, you know what? I've made it now. I am racing in DTM, so you lot need to respect me. But I thought it was very interesting reading the book that, like, you were still so keen to not show any weakness at all, weren't you? Like when they offered you the drive and we said, we'll make the car lighter, or when they offered to put foam in the car to give you some protection, like it was a no every time. And I wonder how you reflect on that Susie, who was not going to show any weakness at all.
That Susie should have taken all the help that was offered to her in that moment. But, you know, I was a fierce little girl. And I think sometimes as you grow up, you can sometimes forget that fierceness because society imprints its own impressions on you, and life becomes a reality of thinking, well, it's not quite as easy as I thought. But sometimes I look back and I think, my God, you were such a fierce little girl. And I have so much respect for that little girl. And there's sometimes in my life where I think, don't lose that, because it's so easy to get caught up in everything else when you become a mother or a wife. But I don't ever want to lose that fierceness. And I remember this look of disbelief when they said, you don't want
Tell us
weight
that
out
story,
of the
because
car.
I think it's a brilliant story.
I'd waited a long time to get to have the meeting with Norbert, and at the time Gerhard Unger. And I came into the boardroom at the Mercedes-Benz Motorsport headquarters in Stuttgart, and I was offered a 1-year contract on the back of a good test in Barcelona. And they said, and we'll be taking 30 kilos out of the car so that you're able to compete at the front. And without even having to think about it, I said, I don't want the weight out of the car. And they were silent, and they looked at each other, and I said, I don't need that. I can compete. I don't need the weight out of the car to be able to compete against these guys. And they eventually said, okay, well, you'll be the same weight. And I didn't realize then that I was in the B team. So I was in an older version of the car. So actually my goal wasn't to win races. It was actually to try and be the best of the midfield in a hope that one day I would get into the top car. But sometimes now I think if I'd just taken that help, maybe it would have been easier. But then on the other hand, would I have ever been respected for my results? Because I would always have had an advantage.
And what do you think the answer to that question is?
Listen up, Formula One fans. There's another exclusive Formula One conversation that you can watch right now. If you want to see 2-time Formula One champion Mika Häkkinen talking to me, just join High Performance Pro immediately. And you can hear Mika discussing in detail that shocking accident at Adelaide in the mid-90s where he came very close to losing his life, what it was like going wheel to wheel with Michael Schumacher, and how he sees the McLaren driver battle shaping up this season. If you want to see it right now, go pro and get episodes before anyone else. Hit join down below right now. Home life can make sleep hard. The kids wake up, your partner works late. You know that feeling when you're right in the middle of deep sleep and suddenly your partner shifts, they turn over and suddenly you're wide awake? Well, that's the reality for me and a lot of people. Simba's mattress design absorbs movement. So when one person wriggles, the other doesn't feel a thing. And you can wake up feeling rested, not resentful. And if you share your bed with a wriggler, this could drastically change your nights. Simba reduces partner disturbance with responsive layers that isolate motion. The covers unzip for washing so you keep the bed fresh. From their hybrid mattress to their height and firmness adjustable hybrid pillow and temperature regulating duvets, every single Simba product is designed to keep both sleepers comfortable. So no overheating, no tossing and turning, just better rest for everyone. You can also try it in real life for 200 nights with no quibble returns and a 10-year guarantee. So sleep better tonight with Simba. Shop now at simbasleep.com/high performance.
Well, it's who I am. I don't shy away from challenges. And I was of the belief, and I still am of the belief, that I can compete on the highest level without having an advantage. And this sport isn't segregated. So it's very difficult to then say, well, a girl's in the same race, but she's got a lighter car. Is that fair? Is that pure? I don't believe it is. So I stand by my decision at the time to have said, no, I don't need that to compete. But I also, now with getting older and more experience, if someone wants to help you, it's okay to accept help. Yeah. And I didn't put the foam in to help my neck on the first DTM test, but when I was doing the race distance at Barcelona, Lewis came to me and said, listen, your neck won't survive it. You've got to, lap one, you've got to lean on your headrest and make sure they build in a headrest, get it painted the colour of the car so it's not obvious. But that's what's going to help you perform in that long run and be able to make the race distance. And he was absolutely right. And I took his advice. I didn't try to be a heroic of holding my head up through turn 3 at Barcelona for 78 laps.
When you drove the F1 car?
When I drove the F1 car. Yeah. So I did learn from experience that sometimes it's okay to accept help. But I don't ever regret not taking the advantage of the less weight. I think by the time I had got that far, I'd already overcome so much noise around my gender. And I started racing at the age of 8. I had a motorbike at the age of 2. I never set out on a path to prove what a woman could do in a male-dominated sport. I love racing. I was that competitive little girl. I loved the speed. I loved the adrenaline. And I loved the sport. And it wasn't really until I got into my teenage years that I realised I was, more often than not, the only girl on track, because you're wearing a helmet, so it's not always the most obvious. Yeah. And I think because all this noise had been created around my gender, that I was getting really good at blocking it, that I wanted to be taken seriously as a racing driver. I had full belief in my abilities because I had to, because I had so many doubters, that I realized very quickly, well, if I don't believe in myself, I'm not going to be able to convince others to believe in myself. So I had that belief because I knew I had to. I had that confidence because I knew I needed it in situations, that I wasn't going to get maybe the bandwidth of, is she good? Well, no, I had to be good enough. And I had to put myself forward, because if I didn't, there wasn't others that were going to do it for me. And I think that toughness and that hardness, it held me in good stead throughout my career, but definitely becoming a wife and a mother brought in a softness, which I'm glad it did, because I was hard. And that hardness isn't always easy in other elements of your life.
Like what?
I think it's a power to admit weakness. It's a power to say, I don't know, or I'm struggling. But I never felt in my environment that I could do that. Whereas now, I have no problem in saying I'm struggling or I'm not sure I'm good enough. It's okay. And I think the world has changed in a positive, in that we can speak more openly about our struggles. And it's up to the individual how open they want to be with the struggles or what support network they can put around them. But I was just so used to not being able to show weakness. And I remember a World Series by Renault test, I could barely hang on out on track. But I came into the pits and said, yeah, everything's fine to the team, and went to the toilets and cried my eyes out thinking, how am I going to get to the end of this test? But it wasn't an environment where I felt I could show any form of weakness. And I do think that's changed now.
But when you're in the toilets crying, thinking, how am I going to get through this? Where do you find the answer, and what was it?
The answer was dig deep, get back out there and find a way, because there was no option for me to say, well, I don't think I can drive the car, because I was set to race in that category the following season. And there was no way I was going to admit to the team that I was losing 2.5 tenths in that one corner because I simply couldn't hang on to the car. So it was digging deep, and I managed to kind of hold my arm against the side of the car. But it's why now when, we have wider discussions, do the junior formulas need power steering or not? Is it possible for a young woman to manage physically the ladder up to Formula One? I think sometimes it's harder than it needs to be, because in a Formula One car we have power steering. So why does it need to be a physical barrier in the junior formulas when it isn't something at the pinnacle of the sport? But at that time, and quite often I see the young drivers now that I work with who refuse to say, well, it's actually really difficult out there. And I'm the one that has to say to them, I know how difficult it is out there. I know how physically demanding it is. I know when you get into a single seater for the first time, your first day in a Formula 4 car, it is tough. And it's okay for it to be tough. You don't need to shy away from the fact that it is challenging. But how are we going to get you fit enough to manage it in the F4 car? And because I've been through that journey, and to go back to your question, it was that inner tenacity and determination that got me through, that said, you're going back out there and you're going to find a way to get quicker and to hold it through that fast right-hander.
I thought some of the stories in the book about what was going on were also a testament to your power as a racing driver and as someone who was putting other people in uncomfortable situations. Like, there's the great story about you racing in DTM. John Alesi was involved in the series, and you get out of the car, and what was he saying on the radio while the race was on?
Get this girl out of my way.
That's what he's saying over the team radio, because they shared the same team. And I think that shows that you were, it's not the right thing for him to be saying, but it's almost like, yeah, look where you were. You were causing this ex-F1 driver to be frustrated and angry and not know what to do with that anger, But there was also a story in the book that wasn't about racing. And are you happy to talk about it? It's what happened after the party that you were at in Germany. Because I think it is also it's in the book for an important reason. I think it's important to talk about it here if you're happy to.
Anything that's in the book, I'm happy to talk about, and I put it in the book for a reason. I didn't mention names in the book because I didn't feel it was necessary, given the outcome of what happened. But the incident you're referring to, I felt had to go in because I think it's something a lot of women will be able to relate to. There was a party celebrating the end of the season. It was DTM drivers and the Formula One drivers together, and there was a powerful member who tried to get into my room at 2:00 in the morning. And they didn't get into the room. They later apologized for it. But it was a really uncomfortable situation for me. And I felt it was important to put in because then I didn't tell anyone because I didn't know who I could tell. It wasn't an environment where I felt there was anyone that I could say, listen, I'm frightened. This thing happened. And what was the thing? Because in the end, they didn't get into my room. So it was just an attempt to get into the room. There was an apology. But it was a situation that just shows you as a woman how quickly a situation can come down to a split-second decision. And it puts you in a very uncomfortable spot. And I also felt it was important to put in because I do think the world has changed in that now I would like to think that there would be someone that a young woman can tell. Not just tell, but be listened to, and there'd be actions put into place to make sure that it wouldn't happen again, or there's at least an understanding of what did happen and if there were any ill intentions.
And you say an apology was offered.
It was given.
That sought by you?
No.
So it came without you having to go and confront the perpetrator?
Yeah.
What did he say?
I owe you an apology. Straight away when I saw him the next time.
And you said?
Apology accepted.
Do you wish you had spoken out at that time?
No, because I don't know who I would have spoken to.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they would have done anyway. But I felt it was important to put in the book because I do think it's important to speak out now when you're put in an uncomfortable situation. And it's not easy. It's not always easy as a woman to judge what is the right thing to do. And it has consequences as well, which need to be thought through. But it was something that I went through that was uncomfortable, and I felt would have been not fair of me to have left out such a difficult moment.
And beyond the fear of somebody trying to get into your room at that time, were you worried about the consequences of your refusal to open that door in terms of your career?
The person was very powerful and could have had a huge influence on my career, but that wasn't the reason why I didn't do something. It was more in that environment and at that time, there was nobody to tell, or there wouldn't have been a clear understanding of what anyway would have been the consequences. But I do think the sport has definitely changed for the better in that you can speak up now. Not always does it result in the outcome it should, but you can at least speak up now and you will be listened and you will be heard. And that's a big change in the right direction.
And at this point in your career, what was the thing that was still driving you at this point? Because, you've been through this horrendous experience in a hotel room with a fellow member of the motorsport community. You've had a mechanic in the team saying, last year's female driver was fat, and you having to say, no, it's me. I look different to how I looked last season. You had a member of
to be fair to him, I'd lost 10 kilos between the seasons.
But even so, right? Even so, you had a PR person saying, we need to make you look like a sexy racing driver. Jean Alesi saying, get this girl out of my way. Constant hurdles, constant battles, constant challenges. What was keeping you going at this point? Because I think you are one of the greatest stories of resilience that we've ever had on high performance, without any doubt.
I think I was, as much as it all sounds so negative, I was still a Mercedes-Benz driver racing in German touring cars, which at the time was a huge series, biggest touring car championship in the world. So I don't want it to sound like it was all negative. I had huge opportunity. I had great experiences. We've highlighted the struggles and the tough moments, but there were also great moments along that journey. And not forgetting that's where I met Toto. That was the big love story and is the big love story. So I think it would be unfair to just say it was all tough. Yes, it was tough because I was doing something which was unusual for a woman. In that environment, there weren't any other women. And it was at times really difficult to navigate and to balance. But that's why, I keep saying it's why I'm so thankful in the role that I'm in, that the next generation, they won't have it like that anymore, because there won't be those off-the-cuff remarks. There won't be the only one, because they're not the only one anymore. They've got each other, they're respected, and they have opportunity. They don't need to fight maybe just quite as hard as I did. When I think now to a 16-year-old girl coming out of karting, having the opportunity of F1 Academy, that's something I could never have even dreamed of when I was racing. But the fact that the sport has progressed in that way, I think, is a testament to the progress. And if I've played a small part in that, and if it was my tenacity that kept me going to get me in this position to be able to make that possible, then it's worth it, because I don't look back with any resentment of, oh God, it was so tough. Yes, it was tough, but there were also huge highs. I was racing. I enjoyed the racing. I enjoyed the environment. And it led me into Formula One with Williams, which was a goal since I was a little 13-year-old girl. So there was also a lot of positives along the way.
But I'm taken by, there's a very keen distinction that Brené Brown, the writer, talks about, the difference between fitting in and feeling that you belong. And it sounds like there was a stage where you've gone from having to fit in to very much feeling that you belong in this world. When did that happen, and what could you teach our audience about the difference and how they can find a sense of belonging?
Well, that idea of fitting in and having to fit the mold, that was definitely challenging when I was racing, and I think that's changed. Because when I was racing, there was this perception, okay, if you're a female racing driver, you're either the sexy female racing driver or you're the tomboy. Well, I didn't want to be portrayed as the sexy female racing driver, because that's not who I am. I'm not comfortable, stripping down for a photo shoot and putting lots of makeup on. But there was an element where you're representing a brand, you're representing sponsors. There has to be a comfort zone you find yourself in, because that is a part of the role. It's not just getting in a car and driving. But then there's the other mold of saying, well, if she's not that, then she's just a tomboy. She's very butch, and I wasn't that either. Yep. I enjoy fashion. I like being the best version of myself. And it was about trying to find my own path of saying, well, if I want to make an effort and look good, that doesn't mean I can't be taken seriously as a racing driver, but that doesn't mean I need to be portrayed as the sexy racing driver. And, in F1 Academy now, we did a great partnership with a makeup brand. And I very much said to all the drivers, you are who you are as individuals. Some of you will want to wear lots of makeup. Some of you will want to wear none. You decide, because that doesn't judge you as a racing driver. If you want to wear a full face of makeup and go out there and be fierce on track, you can. And nobody is going to tell you that that's right or wrong, because you are you and you stay true to who you are. And that's something which I battled with, because people tried to put me in a mold, and I tried to keep myself out of going on my own path. And that's definitely the role Toto played, because he very much said, you are who you are. Stay authentic to who you are. And you need to carry on in that path and not be forced one way or the other. And that was a moment where I really felt a weight off my shoulders.
How soon did you feel comfortable with Toto to be yourself?
Almost instantly. I mean, he's someone that's very easy to talk to anyway, but from when we got together to when we got engaged, when we got married, it all happened pretty quickly, because he's someone that just I connected with. We understood each other so quickly and so clearly that it was instant in a way. And the role he's played in me, having gone from being that fierce, hard, young racing driver, and the different chapters I've gone through, obviously getting married, becoming a mother, but having my time in Formula One, and then in Formula E and Formula One. I say a very powerful statement in the book. I wouldn't be here if he wasn't there. He played a big part in that journey of me being more comfortable in who I am, but he always found this balance of never wrapping me in cotton wool, of never shying me away from the challenges, because he knows how tough this industry is. And he also knew that those challenges would make me stronger. He's got a lot of empathy, and he's always able to put himself in the position of others to understand, okay, why does she have that viewpoint, or why is she feeling that in this moment? And he's not scared to talk about his own struggles and weaknesses. So it's never like you feel you're inferior or he's speaking down to you. And we're just very open with each other. And it's very easy when we've all got such busy lives and you're juggling family life and then your own career to sometimes not communicate well enough, and suddenly it's disjointed. But we always make an effort to speak openly with each other. Also, the difficult topics of, well, I'm not feeling supported right now, and it can't always be you that gets to dictate the schedule, because I want to have my own career. But he's always been very good at understanding who I am. He knew that I'm someone that's very driven and ambitious, so it was never going to be that I suddenly became a wife and a mother and let all of that go. And he didn't want me to be that version of myself either. So he was always very respectful of my own ambitions. And we're just very open with each other in terms of the struggles we're facing and how we can support each other. But I don't want this to sound now like it's all rosy and there's never difficult moments. Like with anyone, there's challenging times where we're both under a lot of stress and we're trying to manage family logistics, and sometimes we drop the balls, but we just always have the open conversations no matter how hard they are.
And he's stood by you through some amazing times in recent years, and I want to talk to you about, Formula One, Formula E, there's lots to talk about, but you've also been there alongside him in some of his tough moments as well. What was it like seeing the personal strain on him during those challenges of late 2021?
Toto's someone that can soak up so much pressure and make it look easy. And there's been moments where I've thought, wow, that's a lot now. But he has an easiness about him. But he's always also the first to put his hand up and say, okay, I'm struggling. And he's not scared to admit that. And he doesn't see that as weakness. He sees that as, okay, this is something I have to deal with. This is something I need to get through. I think a lot of it is related to his difficult childhood. But that was the moment where I had to step up and say, okay, well, how can I make this better for you? Because I haven't experienced that myself. But what I appreciate a lot is that he took me on the journey with him. He didn't shut himself in a room and say, well, this is a dark time for me. He was always very open of this is how I'm feeling, this is how it is, and I need to figure this out. And it enabled me to not be shut off and struggle to understand what he was actually going through. And then what I respect the most is the fact that he was willing to talk about it, because he felt if he was going through that, there was others that were going through it. And if he could speak openly about it, it might make it easier for others to understand that it's okay to go through those difficult moments. And I've gone through difficult moments in my life, but in a different way, where it's been challenging moments of struggling to hang on to who I was after becoming a mother, of trying to understand, well, what does come next and how can I hang on to who I am and not lose myself. But a different type of challenge than what he went through.
How was he feeling after that moment? What did he say to you that made you realise, actually, I need to be here now. I need to, as you say, step up?
It was just something which didn't even need to be said. It was obvious, and we're very good at leaning on each other.
Yeah,
he's not someone that tries to always maintain control and look like everything is perfect. He's the first to put his hand up and say, I really need your help in this moment. But it was intuitive. He didn't have to say, can you pick this all up just now, because I need time to figure this all out. It was I think very clear to me, and we're two people that definitely are on the same wavelength. So it didn't even need to be obviously said. And then it was also obvious when I could step back again, where he was back, and it wasn't a moment where you could say, oh, that was the moment, or there. It was just a flow that happened, and we got through it.
What did you do?
Listened a lot. Definitely cleared my calendar, in that I only did the very necessary things at that moment so that I was there. Because sometimes it's just being there. You don't always need to be having the big, deep conversations, but just being there and being there in those moments so the person isn't alone, that you're managing all the family logistics so that they're not strained by their inability to do the things that they normally do. And just being very present and making sure that when I was away, it was only for things that I really had to be away for work-wise.
And can we talk about him supporting you after you had Jack? I think it's a really important topic of conversation, this. How did you feel after Jack was born? Because I think the image of parenthood is that suddenly everything makes sense, everything's in flow, you've got a child, you shouldn't be anything other than happy. How can anything be more important than having a baby or a child? Here's your purpose, everything suddenly makes sense. But so often that is not the lived experience of people, and it makes them feel very strange when they feel it should be. I don't know whether that relates to how you felt at that time.
I was very open about that in the book because I wanted people to realize that it's okay for it not to be okay sometimes. I was super happy of becoming a mother and felt all of the joys that you do, but after a few months, very quickly realized, okay, well, I can't give up everything and just be a mother and a wife.
How did you know?
My instinct. I have too much fire in me, too much drive to not have my own challenge and my own purpose in life. And being a mother is very challenging and it gives a lot of purpose in your life. But I knew from my past experiences in my past career, it wasn't going to be enough for me. And that's an individual decision you have to take. But I always said, the days where I was in the office were easier than the days where I spent at home all day with a 1 or 2 year old, because it is exhausting. But it was also the battle for me in that Toto was traveling a lot and having huge success in Formula One. So if I was going to do something and that would take myself away from Jack, it had to mean something. It had to be worthy of taking me away from the family life. And it had to be something that I felt passionate enough about. And I know passion is a very commonly used word now, but it had to be something I really wanted to do, because it couldn't just be for the sake of it. And it was challenging finding what that would be, because I obviously had a husband that traveled a lot, and I was very adamant that I couldn't work in motorsport because I didn't want to work for him or against him. So I really was exploring lots of different things, and I very much relied on my gut instinct of what felt right. But I remember when I was going through this difficult period, a lot of people kind of said, you just, it's postnatal depression, it's fine. It's like, well, how dare you so quickly label what I'm going through, that it should suddenly just be postnatal depression because that's what women get after they have children. No, I was going through a huge adjustment in my life of suddenly having this little human being that I loved more than anything in the world relying on me for everything. And suddenly you weren't just taking a work call, or you weren't just driving to a meeting. Everything had to be so coordinated because that little person relied on you. And that was a real adjustment. And then also realizing that I wanted to work again, that I wanted to find the next challenge, and that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I then also had the judgment of people saying, well, you don't need to work. Is it really fair that you're leaving your son when your husband travels so much? So much judgment from others.
Were you depressed, do you think?
No, I think I was going through a huge moment of a adjustment in my life.
Yeah.
But having seen what Toto went through, it wasn't the same experience.
How did you learn who to listen to and who not?
I think I flexed that muscle so often during my racing career, and it's something that holds me in such good stead even to this day. It's not that I don't care what others think. I mean, the people that I respect, I care what they think, but I'm responsible for my own happiness. And everyone is always going to have an opinion or judge how you do something. But in the end, in that moment, I knew how bad I felt, and I knew what I needed to do to make myself feel better. So the judgment of, you're going back to work and that's not fair. And I didn't worry about those comments because I knew that actually I was going to be a better wife and mother if I worked. And it was the right decision for me. And I often say to all of my colleagues in F1 Academy and the drivers, don't worry about all the noise of all the opinions of what others think. Only you know what's right for you, because there's only one you. And it's not what's right for someone else. It's not what society tells you is right for your path. Only you know what's right for you and what happiness means for you. And don't let others imprint their impressions of what's right for you, because that decision can only sit with you. And in this day and age where there's so much social media which is showing you what's perfection, what it should be, don't get caught up in that. Follow your own path and make sure that you're forging that path, because quite often I find you're suddenly in the passenger seat, excuse the pun, where suddenly things are rolling and you're just rolling with them because, well, is there an option not to roll with them? Make sure that there's the decisions that are happening in your life and the path that you're on, is that actually the path you want to be on? Or is it the path you're on because everyone is just forcing you to be on that path? But I also realized that what brings me, and maybe the pandemic helped in this, what brings me the happiness are how cliched it is, but it's the simple things. It's time with my family. It's the time with my son, putting my phone away. It's not the invitations to all the big events where you get dressed up and then stand in a room with small talk with people. You might think that initially, but I realized quite quickly, well, that doesn't make me happy. So I got very good at saying no and just prioritizing and making sure that I filled my life and my schedule and my days with things that I actually wanted to do. You have to go through the process of finding yourself and discovering, well, who are you and what does make you tick and what does bring you joy? What ignites you? What would you do if you had a free day and it was your day to plan? But that only comes later, but it is massively liberating. And people, particularly women, talk about the perils of aging. I wouldn't have it any other way, because with age comes experience, and experience allows you to just drop all the noise, which is so irrelevant anyway, and it allows you to really focus on what does make you happy, what priorities you want to have in your life, and to shape your life as to you, how you want to have it. And it's not always, I can't make every day as I want. There's certain obligations that I have to do, and there's days where I have to do things I don't want to do, but it does allow me space to create the moments that I really do get a lot of enjoyment for. And I obviously try and prioritize those over the days where I do stuff that I don't enjoy so much.
I'm slightly disappointed, that we've got to this point and we've skipped over the text message you sent to Toto.
That I sent.
That is a very important point. Do you remember the words, or shall I read them out? If it had to be.
If it had to be someone from Mercedes, it would only ever be you.
I didn't realise what a romantic you were. The most important text you've ever sent?
Absolutely. Yeah, and the most frightening text I've ever sent.
Why?
You put yourself out there, and it wasn't a given, but again, it was my instinct. I felt that connection with him through the conversations that we had, and it would always been kind of in a jovial situation where we hadn't made it obvious to each other, but it might have been a possibility. And I just thought, I can't leave it like this. And I sent the text, and that was the start of something that very quickly turned into something very special.
How fast did you get a response?
Well, I got the response quite quickly, but he was getting into an aeroplane and he said, you'll know it because in the book it's, well, that's nice to hear. I'll call you as soon as I land. And I was like, what? I mean, on the one hand, it wasn't dismissive, but it wasn't overly positive either. But then he called as soon as he landed, and then very quickly. I mean, I didn't know at the time, had bought the engagement ring 6 weeks later. Wow. So it was pretty good pretty quickly.
I just find it really interesting that you were so guarded and so many barriers were up, and then suddenly you meet this guy and those barriers have gone. I wonder whether he started with the vulnerability to break them down, or whether you were comfortable from the first moment.
No, I think he was key in allowing me to feel that I could be vulnerable. And it's interesting because he always said, in the time when he was in DTM, but before we came together, you always kept your distance. You were never someone that anyone could really, get too close to, that distance. And I always respected that you kept that distance. And I guess it was because I had seen how quickly and how unfairly women got reputations in such an environment. And I definitely say unfairly because it was never the same the other way around. But I felt if I was going to succeed, I couldn't put a foot wrong because there were so many ways that I could very quickly slip up and my dream of being a professional racing driver would be over. But with Toto from that very first, the text message, you have to actually mention the fact that we had spoken on the phone before. It didn't come from anywhere. But I had called him because he'd had a bad accident trying to break the lap record at Nürburgring. But from the first conversation with him, it was easy. And I felt like I could open up. But that vulnerability definitely was something. And that softness is definitely what came when we got together.
I've loved going through the incredible life and career that you've had. And I think what's really important is that at this moment, you got some amazing opportunities. The first one being a team boss in Formula E, right? And I guess all of those lessons, the highs, the lows, the challenges, the resilience, the emotional intelligence, had to be used to their full capacity to suddenly run a team in Formula E, which I know had its various challenges. When you walked into that team, what was the secret to the powerful leadership that you brought? Because there was huge success at that time.
Well, the team had been racing around at the back and hadn't been successful. And so it was a turnaround job. But, to summarize it, I definitely surrounded myself with brilliant people and I empowered them. I set up a culture where the women in the team, and I ended up with the most diverse team, but not intentionally. And I always said, I don't get any world championship points from creating the most diverse team. But I created a culture where I'm not going to judge how long you sit at your desk. I'm not going to judge how often you're in the office or whether you have to take your son to an appointment at the doctor's at 9. You do the job in your own terms, but I'm going to judge you on the performance you bring in the job. And the women that came to the team were brilliant at what they did and put into an environment where they could actually thrive and not have to feel like they were being judged as mothers or wives of how much they could be in the office. Also gave them a sense of, well, actually in this culture I can thrive. And so we ended up building a team where the women felt they could do their jobs really, really well because I gave them that freedom. And obviously I had the same freedom because I couldn't move to Monaco. But we also built a team where there was an openness. I'd never driven an electric racing car. I didn't know all the terminology. I didn't go into the first meeting pretending I did know everything. And there was technicians and technical people in the team where for sure they thought, well, she's just an ex-racing driver. How's she going to turn this team around?
How did you know that?
You feel it in a room. It's never an obvious statement. It's never a deep negativity, but as a woman, you can always feel it in the room when there's skepticism. But I didn't, in a way, understood their skepticism. I never judged them for having it. I just methodically went around my plan of saying, okay, how do I get the right people on board? How do I bring an openness and communication to the team? How do I set realistic goals? How do I bring an energy in? It's very difficult to bring energy. Energy is something which comes from within. And how was I going to create that energy where we were in this situation where we all had a belief that we could become winners? And then suddenly 1 year later, we'd won our first race. And suddenly we knew what it was to win. Well, if we can do it once, we can sure as hell do it again. And then slowly the whole momentum turned in the team, and we had a real camaraderie of being a group because we weren't a big manufacturer. We were functioning on a fraction of the budget of the big teams. And it wasn't about having the fanciest garage or having the most high-tech kind of elements, but we were disciplined and we had a really, really efficiently run organization. And in a way, we were the underdogs, and we loved being the underdogs because we could challenge the bigger teams and take them on and win, which put them under more pressure. So it was a really, really interesting chapter of my life where I learned so much. There was definitely still moments of thinking, what have I got myself into? Because initially there were so many elements that I had to very quickly learn, and I was out of my comfort zone, but also the realization that I love being out of my comfort zone. I love challenging myself, learning new things and forcing myself to keep improving as a person and never believing that, well, I'm 42, this is who I am. No, there's always the ability to keep improving yourself and to keep learning new things.
But I also think that the secret that you possess is the ability to bring people on side. You don't get things done by forcing people. You're able to bring them on the journey. I think a great story in the book is when you went to see Christian, and we all know that your husband and Christian have had some really heated battles on and off track over the last few seasons, and at times it's crossed the line. But he goes, I won't take a car. I'll take 3 cars in F1 Academy. So what is the secret to being able to put other things aside and actually bring people on the journey that we want them to come on? How do we sell our dream to other people?
I mean, that was a pivotal moment, because for Christian to commit in that way was the moment I thought, I can do this. Because that was, having McLaren, Ferrari, and then Red Bull, and then knowing if I had them, eventually Toto had to say yes. That was the moment I thought, well, if I've got Christian on board, this is going to happen. And I obviously knew people that Christian knew very well that were going to present the idea on my behalf. But I definitely take people on the journey with me. I never try and force it through on my own. And I'm also quite open to criticism. When I sat down with Fred Vasseur for the first time, he's someone I respect a lot. He knows a lot about junior formulas. He gives me a lot of, feedback, especially even to this day of what's not working and what I need to do better. And I don't shy away from that. I say to everyone, well, tell me what we can do better. I don't have all the answers, but we want to make this a success. So if you've got inputs for me, challenge me, bring me what we need to do better, and I'll most certainly try my best. And if I can't, there'll be a reason why I can't. But even in the Formula E team, it was this sense that we were on a journey together. It wasn't just me on my own trying to force good results. It was bringing people on the journey, enjoying the journey, making the journey a big part of what this was. It's so often that we're always just talking about what the destination is, but there has to be enjoyment in the journey towards the destination. Otherwise, you end up in the destination, you think, well, was that it? Yeah. And I do think, F1 Academy is seen as a very female-led movement, but all the main players in the sport who are not women but actually men, they were on the journey with me with F1 Academy, and it wouldn't have been possible without them. And this mantra where you need to bring men on the journey with you, absolutely agree, because F1 Academy wouldn't be what it is without the collective effort.
Brilliant. Ready for some quick fire questions?
I hope so.
The 3 most important non-negotiable behaviours in life.
Politeness, kindness, loyalty.
What advice would you give to a teenage Susie?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would have so much advice. I think believe in yourself. Believe in yourself, because there'll be moments where others don't believe in you, and it's going to take your belief in your own abilities to make things happen.
What's the best bit of advice you've ever been given, and why?
Be authentic. Be who you are. It's so often that we're forced into thinking we have to be someone else, that we're not enough. Well, you are enough. Be who you are and be the best version of who you are.
If you could go back to one moment of your life, what would it be and why?
I don't need to go back. If I had to go back, my wedding day. Best day ever.
The final question to leave people thinking about, your one golden rule for a high-performance life.
Bring your best self to the table. You can only be the best version of you. And if that's not enough, walk away with your head held up high and say, I gave it my best shot. But you can only be the best you, and be the best you.
You are so inspiring. Listen, thank you so much. The book is brilliant. I absolutely mean it. And I think having sat here before the conversation, I was thinking, I wonder whether I'll get the sense that Susie's done all these things and she's ready to chill out a bit. And I absolutely have not got that impression. I can't wait to see what comes next. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Susie.